Nico Simko, thank you for having us and hosting us in your office. For someone who doesn't know what Clair is and what it's all about, can you explain it in about like 30 seconds?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being here, Asher, and welcome to the Clair office. So if you've never heard of Clair, most people might have heard of Venmo, which is the ability to pay friends, for a meal, whatever else you need. We kind of wanted to create the same thing, but for your payroll. So if you've worked hours and your paycheck is coming next week, why can't you just get access to your money right now? That's what we're solving.
So I caught you in your workday, and I kind of understand what the workday of someone building a big financial company is. What'd you say? It's a tool company. What the day is like? What do you do every day?
Yeah, it's a company. The definition of my day is it changes all the time. I don't have a set schedule. Depending on what the company needs, I'll jump on it. It can be working with existing customers, new customers. It can be working on hiring. It can be working with the finance team to build plans. As the company has evolved, I've kind of moved more and more away from being a founder to being kind of much more of a CEO. The difference here is when the company's early, as a founder, you try to do something called find product market fit, which is, hey, I have a hypothesis that somebody might need a service. I think that I'm well positioned to offer it. And therefore, you're going to try to prove that you can match supply and demand. So once you prove that, then it's about company building and making sure that whatever you found at what I like to call the atomic unit, which is like a small amount of like pull from the market, that it can actually scale. Some of that is strategy, but actually 80-90% of it is execution, which is strategy is like, hey, I think that I've been able to sell, this widget to, or, have distribution for this widget to a certain amount of people. I think that I can replicate that 100,000 times and that it's going to be both beneficial for, my customers, but also the unit economics of the product work well. And so that's a different phase. And then once you've gotten to that explosive product market fit vision, then it's like, okay, so how do you, create a system behind the whole company so we can replicate that with different products, with different markets. And that's what the stage Clair is at now.
Where did you learn that, to transition? How did you know when it was time to transition into the CEO role?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that for everyone, it's going to be different. I would say, like every single leadership role, it's a lot about what you as a person, think a leader should be, and you should find your own voice. If you look at sports teams, it's the same thing. Some coaches have vastly different leadership kind of traits. Some are more vocal, less vocal. Some are very loud in the in the locker room, some are not. It's the same thing about how you transition from a founder to CEO. It's like you have to find your own voice. You have to realize when you being in the weeds and trying to find product market fit is actually hurting the business more than helping it. You have to surround yourself with amazing people. We've been lucky to have that at Clair. And then out of that, you need to kind of make a decision on things where you need to spend less time and let others take the lead.
Was there anybody in your life that was that person?
That was
I know you have a big sports background with fencing.
Yeah.
Is there any influence from fencing?
Yeah, fencing is an individual sport. I think I love watching soccer. And I think there's amazing coaches like Pep Guardiola or the French coach Didier Deschamps, who's like just amazing coaches.
These names, but
yeah, they're like amazing soccer coaches. And I think soccer, it's a difficult sport, right? There's probably the most competition than any other sport because it's so easy. It's global sports. Everybody, there's a big pool of talent, and then you might have the most talented individual players, but you can still lose to a better team. The ball moves faster than the players, and so it's how as a strategy you're going to put that together and how you're going to manage different personalities. And so just listening to how Pep Guardiola and like all these different coaches like manage their team, how a specific coach can, and I often explain a little bit the leadership position to my team that way, which is my job is to find people who, don't think they're good enough and tell them they're actually better than they think. Find when people think too highly of themselves and feel like, look, you should focus on the details because you're going to start missing on certain steps. That is where my value kind of comes in as a leader, and I've had to find my own voice over time. I didn't have it from day one.
So I never grew up with a big sports background. Do you think founders that don't have a big sports background are missing out on something?
Potentially. I think that it's easier if you've been in sports and care about sports, because you understand how working as a team is important. But I think you can also be in a debate group, or in a big science project, or you can be working for a non-for-profit. Like, sports teams is just one example of like high performing groups. Other startups is a good example. If you're if you're a big reader of biographies, you can also learn by just reading it. Overall, you're always going to face the same problem, which is you're going to have to find your own voice. Like, what worked even for a sibling is not going to be exactly what's going to work for you. Mm-hmm. And so developing your own voice as a leader is a trial and error process. And so there you're going to need like a supportive group of people around you that can give you feedback, so that you can become better as a leader.
So even before you became a leader, what made you want to start Clair? You were working at JP Morgan, right? How did you decide, like, I need to stop with my job and start this company?
Yeah. It wasn't that, black and white process at the beginning. I had an idea at JP Morgan, had no idea what to do with it. And then what got me excited was that there was two people that were willing to quit their jobs and do this kind of with me as co-founders.
Oh, wow. That's how you met them.
Yeah, well, I knew them from before, but the fact that two of people were excited about the idea and joined me was like, okay, like, there's a founding team. Maybe the idea is not going to be perfect. And then the thing that got me also over the line, that was one component. The other part that got me over the line was that, I basically started writing down my thoughts in a structured way, which was just a memo that I would just write on the weekend. And I started presenting it to people, like friends of mine that were in VC, or like people that I knew were, in the tech world, and they got pretty excited about what we were building. And that got me also confidence to say, okay, maybe there's something there. I knew, statistically speaking, that like we had an 80 to 90% chance that we would not make the 2-year mark. And I was kind of comfortable with that. I was like, look, worst case, I love payments, so I'm not going to lose anything by trying to go into the space and learn a lot. And so the downside was quite like low, transparently. I just need to make sure that I have, a little bit of money saved up in case.
It sounds like you have like a backup plan in your head.
Yes,
which
exactly.
I do that too. But did you know that you're ready to like commit your time, possibly your life, to this?
Yeah. And there was a lot of risk for me when I started, because I didn't have a visa to be here. My visa was tied to my job. And so I didn't even have a visa to start my own company. I had to start it and then apply for a visa. And so there was a risk that I would have to leave the country if I couldn't, if this thing wasn't gonna work. The first 2 to 3 years, if the company went down, I had to leave the country.
Oh, wow.
So there was real risk associated with this. But at the time I was like 26, and I felt I would have regretted not trying. And so I had this kind of formula that I wrote on the wall at that time, which was I wanted the second half of my 20s to follow a mathematical formula, which is you maximize opportunity and you minimize regrets. And whatever like supported that, that's what I would do. And so that kind of like focused me and be like, well, the maximizing the opportunity is something like this. And I think that I will be very regretful in 10 years if I don't try it. So I was like, okay, this is actually the perfect thing that I can take on.
Do you have any regrets from the first part of your 20s? Anything you would do differently?
Focusing on work stuff. I think I didn't believe in myself as much as I should have. I really saw the outside world as this extremely daunting, kind of world that, if best I could do was be, one person in the system. But I think the second half of my 20s taught me that like everything you see around you, right? The lights, the microphones, the shoes, the pants, they were all invented by us humans, by people that, some of them just never had an education. And so it kind of like flipped the script for me, which I was like, oh, I can contribute to building something. And that for me was a big realization. So I think if I would have to go back to the first part of my 20s, is be like, know that earlier, because I would have probably had a little bit more, I would say, self-confidence in like what I can achieve. I went to Harvard in undergrad. You're surrounded by extremely smart people. And so I graduated feeling like I was good, but I was not great, And I think that like reassessing, even being good, like in any environment, it doesn't have to be Harvard, is actually we have AGI in our brain. So like if you work really, really hard and you put yourself to something, you can probably achieve more than you think. And realizing that earlier would have been good.
Would people expect for you to have started a business? Would people say that's someone who's going to eventually start their companies? I do know, I did research and I see that I could be wrong, but your father and your grandfather both started companies.
Yeah.
Did that have anything to do with it?
Yeah, it convinced me that it was probably not a good idea to start a business because I know how hard it was for them. My both my parents and my grandpa on my dad's side, like they run businesses. It's very difficult, it's one thing when you're trying to reach your goals at work. It's another one when you have to make payroll for a lot of people. And I think that stress is real. You wake up, in the middle of the night. Now Claire's a completely different category. I don't have to worry about this, but like for a while it was a thing we went through. And so,
stressing about payroll at a payroll company.
Exactly. We're not a payroll company, but we help payroll companies. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But stressing about pay when pay is our business is a funny thing. Yeah. So I think that it helped me be more aware of the risk I would take. And when I did it, I was, I think, a bit more realistic about what entrepreneurship meant. I have a lot of, people in the community that think of like being a CEO as this glamorous thing. It's absolutely not. Like you are, for maybe 1% of the time doing podcasts and like telling your story, but 99% of the time you're dealing with problems that nobody else in the company can deal with. You're dealing with the fact that you don't have a product, you don't have a story, you don't have customers, you don't have money, you don't have a visa, and you're trying to build something that you're the only person on planet Earth that believes should be built. And that is your reality.
Why did you believe so much in the idea?
Yeah, the idea is quite simple. It was like, I came to this country, I didn't have a credit history. I, didn't have a credit score, I didn't have a bank. And I was like, I have a job, but I can't get access to short-term credit. Like, how is that possible? And then looking into data, I saw that 50%, like roughly of Americans, were actually in the same boat. Some of them, of course, have access to credit, but it's not exactly what they're looking for. And I was like, why can't you use employment data to help people with their credit needs? You can think of like car loans, of short-term credit. That's what we do. You can think of, directly paying, credit cards. You can think of so many different forms of credit. There's $18 trillion in consumer credit in this country. Most of it, like about 13 trillion of that is mortgages. But if you look at the 5 trillion left, that's more like real consumer credit. And so the view is like, why can't that be connected to the workplace? And so that's where my kind of love for building came in, was that I really, really, really cared about this problematic. But I didn't start thinking I need to start my own business to happen. It just naturally felt like I had such a clear idea of what I wanted to do and couldn't stop talking about it. I do have a very, obsessive view around like things that I want to get done, and I will work really, really hard to get there. And so I was like, okay, maybe there's something about entrepreneurship that could be good, and I'm aware of the risk that I'm taking. And at 26 years old, I was very comfortable with it. I
want to hear about that work, because I saw this Fortune article that I think it took 2 years to get your first client onboarded. There was work happening before. Yeah. What was that time like when you're putting in the work? Yeah. Was there doubt? Was it a tough time? Was it, I don't know. So
we decided early on at Clair to do things by the book from a compliance standpoint. And what that means is if you're advancing money to people with the expectation of getting paid back, there are multiple bodies of law that exist that regulate this. Many providers in our space, if not almost all of them, have decided, because it's simpler, that they don't need to comply with these rules. And they say, we don't think for XYZ reason that we need to get licensed. We'll wait for another licensing regime because that licensing regime doesn't apply to us. And the reason why I'm telling the story is because it took us 2 years to properly get licensed, and we spent millions of dollars doing that. And we didn't have much revenue at the time. Now, it did help us accelerate a lot after the fact, but those 2-3 years at the beginning were very, very difficult. Other players were pointing the finger at us, and that still hasn't stopped. But I just believed, especially, as someone who when I'm not on a visa anymore, but when I was on a visa, I was like, I had to do things by the book, because if not, I would have to leave the country.
Oh, wow.
So the stakes were very high for me. And when your risk is so on that it's like, it's not about your venture not going well and you getting a job. It's like, you will have 90 days to get out of your apartment and move back to a place that you left when you were 18. That is real.
That happened?
Yeah. Like I didn't have to because the company succeeded, but that I knew was always the risk. As long as I was on a visa and the visa was tied to the company I built, if the company didn't succeed, like you have to leave the country.
Are there any times in that span of time where something was really, it seemed like things were going to go really bad?
It's a good question. We had built a lot of very good things, but we had assumed that consumers would want to download a separate app, get a new debit card, put their paycheck on the debit card to then have access to their pay on demand. It just so happened that that was only the case for about 5 to 6% of the people, and 95% of the people didn't want that. And that was a pretty low point. And we had some hard conversations around, we knew ultimately that we were building something pretty remarkable because we did have a lot of people wanting the product. They wouldn't convert fully. And so we had a lot of conversation with our partners who we built with. We sell to like these payroll and workforce management systems. And then we started kind of being true to ourselves around what we needed to change. But that period was very difficult. It was difficult internally. It was difficult externally. But that's the journey, I would say, of a regular company. I think a lot of people don't talk about it. You usually read them in the books. That's why books are very good. I just finished the biography of like PayPal, and like the story of PayPal is insane. And it's an incredible story of how they got where they are, but it was not a straight path. And so I think that's about the part of like removing the romanticization of entrepreneurship. It's just a very difficult path that you take on.
I want to understand that a bit more. Kind of like you were working on getting different licenses and product market fit. What are you doing day to day at that time? Like when you'd walk into work, like what was a day like?
Day to day, I'd say that part of it, I was still an individual contributor. So I would do a lot of the work, whether it was writing memos to go get licenses. I read the entire Truth in Lending Act myself because at the time we didn't have a ton of money for lawyers. And so I would pre-draft some memos. At the time when it was pre-product market fit, I was also the chief financial officer of the company. So just running the model, making sure we would make payroll. I also spent a bunch of time also refining what our story is to all of our stakeholders, which was investors, telling the story to our partners, which are the payroll companies and workforce management systems, finding product market fit with them, like what kind of experience works for them, not only for us, and then to consumers, what exactly do they want as products? And then there was an enormous component of also just building the product. I don't write lines of code. I can do almost everything but that. And so the idea was like going down into product flows with my co-founder and talking about like what this would look like, talking about design decisions, talking about, all the way down to this office, right? Visiting office space, figuring out what's needed. Think of anything you need in order to get the company going. You have a very, very, very long list, and just went down one by one and just advanced on the ones that were most important day over day.
And when was that time where you're like, okay, this is actually going to work out, and this is going to be good?
I think there's been a few feelings, but there's a lot of gray, right? So it doesn't go from like, black to white or, white to black, whatever it is. It really does go in different shades. And like, I think my view has always been, let me always be a bit scared about what's going to happen, because if I know I'm scared on it, I'm going to pay attention to it. So even now that the company is doing extremely well and it's like growing very, very quickly, I want to retain this kind of founder mode attention where I'm still the person in the company that refreshes most of our data sets. Like I will in the whole company. So I will like review every single thing multiple times a day, make sure that, the users are using the product appropriately. Right before this, I was testing our product. There's like a flow. I said I stepped out because I wanted to go to the bank to test a flow on like repayment. That's what I was doing. Wow. And so like just being inside of our product is super, super important. And so I think like it does feel easier, but then how much strength you can have now that things are going well. So you try to say, okay, how big can this be? And instead of freaking out on like, can you make payroll? You're actually like freaking out on like, okay, so what is my multi-product strategy? So you try to like refocus that energy.
If you were to go back to that time where you're figuring things out, is there anything that you would do differently, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would solely and only focus on finding product market fit. I think there's a few things I was doing that were not that. Assuming success was one of them. We started building, I think, a marketing and operations kind of team a bit too early. So those things you typically do when you have success, right? You need more customer support. You need to double down on marketing. That was too early. I think I would have kept the team on a journey and be less, I would say, trying to sell people on a vision. Because if you think about Steve Jobs, if you think about Elon Musk, right, you think of these people just selling a vision. And the reality is, yes, that's important. But what's most important is also to tell them not a crazy story about how difficult it's going to be. Tell them it's going to be, don't tell them it's going to be easy. Tell them it's going to be ups and downs and that it's going to be difficult. Elon Musk does a really good job at that. And he's like, we're probably going to fail, but we should try. And I think I didn't do enough of we're probably going to fail, because I was scared of telling that to people. Look, maybe in hindsight, I should still do that, because, telling people things are going to fail if you're not Elon Musk, it may be not a good idea. So still debating it. But I think now when I talk to the team, I give them degrees of probability, what I think is going to work and not work, because I don't want to, I want them to trust, my notes. I also tried with our board to tell them we're going to reach certain numbers that are exciting and always beat those. Like, that's our goal. And maybe I'm underselling the business, and I've given that, I've received that feedback as like, I should potentially like sell the business a bit more, because we've been able to beat every single number now for a while. But I feel comfortable with just beating my own forecast quarter over quarter.
Do you approach building a business like somewhat competitively? I feel a little of that energy of like, I need to just be better and keep on fighting forward.
Yeah, it's competition with myself. I think like there's nothing I can do than just be a better version of myself every single day. Like, competition, even if you think about like Microsoft fighting against Apple, it's like, it's very like few times when that actually happens. Like, these two companies are just trying to be the best version of themselves. And over time that compounds. And so I try to think of it that way. At like microcosm is like, feedback I got from the team recently was that my attention span was low. I was like on too many things at once. And so I was like, I'm trying to work on that, like cutting a lot of like attention seeking tools, like spend less time on my phone and like things on the edge. And so like, I'm trying to be like, again, the best version I can, work with a coach, do a 360 feedback, see what I can do better. Telling the story of Clair, cause I'm sometimes not making it justice, like is another one. And so all of that to say is like, I still have a lot of room for improvement.
But do you feel like you changed as a person because of building this company?
You change because it's a rewarding experience when it works. It's very rewarding. I changed, I think, as a person where I have a lot more respect for people who build. I think I was a little naive when I started, which is good, because if I knew what this was, I don't know that I would have signed up for it. It's difficult. And so, especially getting here was difficult. And so...
You think people misunderstand that? You think people...
I think so.
Why do you think they misunderstand it? Why do they not understand like...
Well, it's the same thing as people being scared of being bitten by a shark, is that it's such a thing that is in your face that you think it's going to happen to you, probably super low. But that's now the inverse, whereas like everybody only sees business success and they see, all these companies and all these founders that make hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in returns. But the reality is like almost all the companies fail. And like we tend to be biased by these big events and think that this is going to work, but you have to look at the underlying numbers behind. And so I think that founders tend to burn out about 2 years in, 3 years in. That's usually the harder time. The first year is a honeymoon. And then but passing year 4, 5, 6 and compounding the business afterwards, that is that's what you're striving towards. And I kind of knew that because of kind of what my parents went through and, what my grandpa went through. So I kind of assumed that it would be a high the first year and then like a valley or desert for a few years. And then it would, if then we were lucky and we had worked hard enough, then we had a chance at potentially having a big business that's growing. And so that, I was a little bit more feet underground. I hadn't realized how hard it would be to get here.
So at what point can you claim success? Because it sounds like there's still that underlying fear.
You can't. And that's also what makes you succeed in some way, is that you don't claim success. You need to stay hungry. You need to stay. I think I was a fencer for a while, but I've been running a lot, like since graduation. Ran 3 times the New York Marathon, ran Boston, and training and running marathons has been like the biggest mental strength, like kind of guideline for me. It's everything that happens at Clair and how I feel about everything going on is very related to how I would feel training for a marathon. It's just very difficult. It's very, you need to find consistent kind of push, because the minute I would kind of be content, the company will slow down. And if the company slows down, there is no such thing as slowing down. You die, because you will have competition, you have people beat you. And so it's like, it is a constant growth or nothing. But that's for me to take on. That's not for the whole team to take on. I try to dissociate these two things. And then I need to, with my co-founder, figure out like how much we want to put that pressure on ourselves and the team versus leave it inside and like, and just keep it for later.
That's crazy.
But if I'm not raising the bar, then the company will potentially die in a few years.
That's a crazy mindset. Are there any ways that you've changed since starting this business that maybe you don't like?
That I don't like? Attention span has gone, like, it's just there's so much noise that I think I was able to, not touch my phone for 2 days, which was so nice.
It's crazy. That's actually wild. 2 days.
Yeah. I mean, at the time when, I had a job, I was just like, all right, I'll pick this up on Sunday, like it didn't matter. And then I go to the park, leave my phone at home. What can happen, right?
Have you been able to take a day off?
I have very recently. My wife and I took a few days off. She was switching jobs, so we did that, and it was amazing. It was really, really amazing. I forwarded all my emails during that time to my co-founder, and it was really, really nice. It also
were you actually free, or were you still in the back of your head?
No, I mean, in the back of my head, I was thinking about Claire, but I felt free. Yeah, I felt free. I think it's because the business was doing so well. It made a big difference.
So we are where we are with Clair at this point. If Clair, what are like the future visions for Clair? And if you get there, what do you hope changes in the world?
Yeah, the view for me is that it goes back to the foundation of the company, which is half of the American population has good access to credit. You need to go on a vacation, book a flight, just swipe your credit card. You're going to pay it, 30 days from now. So you have this working capital. 50% of Americans, sure, they have access, to credit cards, but it's usually not what they need. Some don't have access to any form of credit. And I feel like if you have a job, that should be your right, connection point. And so it's decomposing that into multiple different products. Right now, we're only doing that with honestly one product, which is ability to flex your wages. And I think we can do more. Whether it is what I went through, you graduate college, you now have all these bills, you need to move, to do, you need to put like 2 months of rent down when you move in. You have to buy new clothes because probably you don't have the clothes. Like, I'm just thinking of me as like when I graduated college, and I was like, why could my job help me flex some of that money? And then they would do it for really damn cheap because they know I was employed there and it would be part of my contract. And that would have helped a lot. And so I think like, how can you get your job as a collateral? That would be nice. I think people, even another example that I love is if you look at car loans, the cost of car loans has gone up, not only because of Fed funds, but because there's a lot of what we call long tail questions on consumers' ability to repay. And so consumers are paying more for the loans. And so if you could allow consumers to connect their car loan to their place of work, everybody would win. They would pay less, and then the lenders would be happy because they would be a top of stack kind of, repayment flow. And so those are a bunch of examples of like how you can connect credit to the workplace. It's like, employer linked financial services is something that I really believe in. And I think as AI and, as technology honestly as a whole is just much more available in there in front of both employers and employees, I think we're going to see an acceleration of that.
Are there any things that like are in your way right now?
It's a good question. I think that there's a thing that I'm putting on my way, which is, we've turned profitable and I would like to retain profitability. So there's a big debate here on I'm okay to be unprofitable for a little bit, and that can be a year or 2 years, if we feel like the long-term profitability can get to a good level. And so I think what I'm saying is like, there is a restriction right now of like how short-term versus long-term I'm thinking. So it's a self-built restriction. I think with the right continued analysis from the team, we'll make a decision. But I think it's a strategic kind of block we're hosting right now. Also, the company is growing extremely fast, but I think there's a long-term versus short-term. And I'm waiting also for the AI market to like kind of show its true colors and see how real it's going to be. Between some of the numbers that, whether it's OpenAI, Anthropic, NVIDIA will be posting, I just want to know, year into year and 3 years in, like how much this is going to disrupt the market, because you can have a lot of disruption in the market or it can be a boom. And if it's a boom, then like capital markets go with it, then we can access those capital markets. We can make bets for 2 years. But if not, then that's too risky. And so we can keep growing really, really fast without depending on capital markets.
Before we wrap, I have one question about decision-making. And do you make decisions that sometimes people are like, I wouldn't think that way? And how often does it happen that you're making decisions that people might think are like not the right decision to
all
make?
The time. The thing when you make decisions and people are not agreeing with you, most of the time people, it's not that they're annoyed that they don't agree with you. They're annoyed that they didn't feel heard. It's a slight difference. And so if, for example, I decide we need to go right, but like 3 people on the team say, no, we need to go left. The reality is like, it's a lot about actually spending the time to understand why people think like going left is the right idea. And then actually listening to them, understanding what they're saying, acknowledging you've understood, not faking it, like actually understanding it, and then taking it in, thinking about it, taking the time, show them you took the time, and then telling them I've taken in all of your advice, but I still want to go right. You'd be surprised that people are actually fine because they felt heard. Most leaders fail at that because they just decide to go right. They say I'm the CEO, I want to do it this way, and then they lose the team.
Is that learned from experience?
Yes.
Or from this?
Yeah, learn from experience. Everything learn from experience.
And then I guess last question, are there any other problems that you would want to spend 10 years on?
I mean, this one, sorry guys. This one is so big that I'm going to keep going. Like, I was just talking to an investor this morning and it's like, I really just feel we're getting started and it's already been like more than 6 years. There are big problems that I'm very interested in, that, in another life, maybe I would do. One is energy. I think that we have one planet. As I like to tell people, it's not about saving the planet. The planet would be better off if we were not around. But for me, it's like, how do we make sure that we as a hyper intelligent species can continue living very well here? And one of them is energy. We require energy for everything. If anything, we're going to require more and more energy. And so the view is there are so many there's so many ways we can do this better. Nuclear energy for me could be really better used. I think that it has a bad rep with what happened, in Chernobyl and other places like in Japan. But I think with the advancement of technology, I really think we can harness kind of the atom to do things that are different and leave the planet a bit more clean. That would be super exciting to work on.
Well, Nico, thank you for sitting down with me in the middle of your workday, which is kind of crazy, and answering some of my questions. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Asher.